there is a unique kind of pain that comes not from losing someone, but from slowly realizing that the person you trusted was never truly there. Loving a disloyal man does not break your heart all at once. It happens quietly, in moments you try to ignore, in the hesitation before he answers, in the feeling that something is not right, yet you choose silence. Pain rarely arrives as a sudden storm. It begins as a quiet discomfort that you learn to live with. When you love someone who is not loyal, the first signs are often subtle. A delayed reply that feels unusual, a change in tone that you cannot explain, a sense of distance that wasn't there before. These moments are small, almost insignificant on their own, but together they create a feeling that something is not right. And in that moment, you are faced with a choice to listen to that inner voice or to silence it. Most people choose to silence it, not because they are weak, but because they are attached. You tell yourself that you are overthinking, that you are being insecure, that love requires patience and understanding. You begin to create explanations for behavior that does not feel aligned. You defend the person even when your own heart feels uneasy. This is how the pain begins to grow. Not from what is happening outside of you, but from what you are denying within yourself. Your intuition speaks in a very calm and honest way. It does not shout. It does not force. It simply shows you the truth as it is. But when you are afraid of losing someone, you stop trusting that voice. You replace clarity with hope. You start believing in potential instead of reality. You focus on who the person could be, rather than who they are showing themselves to be. And slowly, without realizing it, you disconnect from your own inner guidance. This disconnection creates tension inside you. On one side, there is what you feel deep within: uncertainty, discomfort, doubt. On the other side, there is what you want to believe: love, loyalty, stability. When these two do not match, the mind begins to work harder. It tries to justify, to explain, to make sense of things that do not feel right. But the more you try to convince yourself, the more exhausted you become. You may notice that you start seeking reassurance more often. You look for small signs to prove that everything is okay. A kind message, a moment of attention, a temporary closeness. These become enough to calm your doubts, even if only for a short time. But the underlying feeling does not disappear. It waits quietly until the next moment of inconsistency brings it back again. In this cycle, the pain deepens, not because of a single action, but because of repetition. Each time you ignore what you feel, you move further away from yourself. Each time you choose comfort over truth, you strengthen the pattern. And over time, what once felt like a small doubt turns into a constant weight that you carry within you. There is also a silent fear that keeps you in this place. The fear that if you accept the truth, you might have to walk away. The fear of being alone, of starting over, of letting go of something you have invested your time and emotions into. So instead of facing that possibility, you continue to adjust yourself. You lower your expectations. You become more tolerant of behavior that once would have disturbed you deeply. This is where the real pain forms. It is not just about being with someone who is disloyal. It is about the gradual abandonment of your own standards, your own voice, your own sense of self. You begin to normalize what should never feel normal. You convince yourself that this is what love looks like, even though it feels heavy, confusing, and unstable. And yet, beneath all of this, the truth remains present. It does not disappear. It waits patiently for the moment you are ready to see it, without fear, without excuses, without distortion. Disloyalty does not only exist in actions, it quietly reshapes the way you see yourself. At first, you notice something is off, but instead of questioning the other person, you begin by questioning your own perception. You wonder if you are being too sensitive, too emotional, or too demanding. What once felt clear now feels uncertain. You start adjusting your thoughts to protect the image of the relationship, even if it means distorting your own reality. This is how self-doubt begins. It does not arrive loudly. It enters through small moments of confusion. You ask a simple question and receive an unclear answer. You express a concern and are made to feel like you are overreacting instead of receiving reassurance. You are given just enough to silence you, but never enough to bring clarity. Over time, this pattern trains your mind to hesitate before trusting your own instincts. You begin to replay conversations in your head, searching for where you might have gone wrong. You analyze your tone, your words, your timing. You think that if you could just communicate better, be calmer, or be more understanding, things would improve. This creates an invisible pressure to become someone who is easier to deal with, someone who asks less and tolerates more. Without realizing it, you start shrinking parts of yourself to maintain a fragile sense of connection. Disloyalty also creates comparison. When someone's attention becomes inconsistent, your mind looks for reasons. You may start comparing yourself to others, wondering if there is someone else who is more interesting, more attractive, or more worthy of their loyalty. Even if there is no clear evidence, the lack of stability makes your mind search for explanations. And often, the easiest explanation is to blame yourself. This internal comparison weakens your sense of worth. You begin to measure your value based on how you are treated, rather than understanding that how someone treats you reflects their character, not yours. When attention is given, you feel relief. When it is withdrawn, you feel anxiety. Your emotional state becomes dependent on their behavior, creating a cycle where your confidence rises and falls based on their inconsistencies. At the same time, you may find yourself seeking validation more often. You look for signs that you matter, that you are enough, that the relationship still has meaning, a message, a compliment, a moment of closeness. These become sources of temporary reassurance. But because they are not rooted in genuine consistency, they do not last. The reassurance fades quickly, and the doubt returns, often stronger than before. This cycle creates emotional exhaustion. You are constantly trying to feel secure in a situation that does not offer stability. You invest more energy into understanding, fixing, and maintaining something that continues to create confusion. And the more effort you put in without receiving clarity, the more you begin to question your own worth. You may start to believe that if you were truly enough, things would not feel this way. What makes this experience even more difficult is that it happens gradually. You do not wake up one day with a broken sense of self. It shifts slowly through repeated moments where your feelings are dismissed, your concerns are minimized, and your trust is not honored. Each time this happens, a small part of your confidence is affected. And over time, those small parts accumulate into a deeper sense of insecurity. You may also notice that you become quieter about your needs. You stop expressing what truly bothers you because you expect it will not be received with understanding. You learn to hold things in, to avoid conflict, to keep the peace. But in doing so, you create distance between who you are and how you present yourself. This distance adds another layer of discomfort because you are no longer fully present as yourself. Even when you try to rebuild your confidence, the environment makes it difficult. It is hard to feel secure in a space where honesty is uncertain. It is hard to trust your judgment when it has been repeatedly questioned or dismissed. And so you remain in a state where you are both aware of the problem and unsure of how to fully trust your own awareness. In this way, disloyalty does more than damage a relationship. It interferes with your inner stability. It shifts your focus from understanding the other person's behavior to questioning your own identity, your own value, and your own voice. Pain is often misunderstood because it feels uncomfortable, and anything that brings discomfort is quickly labeled as something negative. The natural instinct is to avoid it, to distract yourself, or to find ways to escape it as soon as possible. But when you look at it more closely, pain carries information. It is not random and it is not meaningless. It appears in very specific moments, pointing towards something that requires your attention. When you experience the pain of loving someone who is disloyal, the feeling itself is not only about what the other person has done. It reflects an inner conflict. There is a part of you that recognizes what is happening clearly, and another part that continues to hold on. Pain arises in the space between these two. It is the signal that something within you is not aligned with your truth. Instead of immediately trying to remove the pain, there is value in observing it, not judging it, not resisting it, but simply allowing yourself to feel it without distraction. When you do this, you begin to notice that the pain has layers. On the surface, it may feel like sadness or disappointment. Beneath that, there may be fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear of letting go of what is familiar. And even deeper, there may be a realization that you have been compromising parts of yourself to maintain a connection. Pain brings awareness to these hidden layers. It reveals what you may have been avoiding. It shows you the moments where you said yes, when you wanted to say no, where you stayed silent, when something did not feel right, where you chose comfort over honesty. These realizations are not easy to face, but they are necessary if you want to understand the full picture of your experience, Ritat. In this way, pain becomes a guide. It directs your attention inward, encouraging you to look beyond the external situation and examine your own responses. It asks you to question why you tolerated certain behaviors, why you ignored your intuition, and why you continued to invest in something that did not feel stable. These questions are not meant to blame you, but to help you see clearly. There is also a shift that happens when you stop seeing pain as an enemy. When you no longer try to fight it, you create space to learn from it. You begin to understand that the discomfort you feel is connected to growth. It is showing you the gap between where you are and where you need to be in order to feel at peace. Without this discomfort, there would be no motivation to reflect, to change, or to move in a different direction. Pain also strengthens awareness of your boundaries. It highlights what is acceptable to you and what is not. When you feel hurt repeatedly, it becomes clear that something is being crossed. This clarity is important because it allows you to redefine your standards. It gives you the opportunity to decide what you are willing to accept moving forward and what you are not. At the same time, pain slows you down. It interrupts the routine of pretending that everything is fine. It forces you to pause and confront what you might otherwise continue to ignore. In this pause, there is an opportunity to reconnect with yourself, to listen more carefully to your thoughts, your emotions, and your inner voice. This reconnection is essential because it brings you back to a place of honesty. You may also notice that pain changes the way you see the situation. What once seemed confusing begins to appear more clearly. The patterns become more visible. The inconsistencies are harder to overlook. This clarity is not created by overthinking, but by allowing yourself to fully experience what you feel without denial. When you stop minimizing your emotions, they begin to guide you toward a deeper understanding. In this sense, pain is not there to punish you. It is there to wake you up. It moves you out of denial and into awareness. It helps you recognize where you have been out of alignment with yourself, and it creates the conditions for a different choice to emerge. Letting go is often misunderstood as a sudden act, as if one day you simply decide and everything changes. In reality, it begins quietly, long before any visible action is taken. It starts the moment you allow yourself to see things clearly, without softening the truth, without making excuses, without holding on to what you wish things could be. There is a shift that happens when you stop focusing on what you feel for someone and begin to notice how that connection makes you feel within yourself. At first, this clarity can feel uncomfortable. You may still have strong emotions, memories, and attachments that pull you back. There are moments when you question your decision, when you remember the good times, when you wonder if things could still improve. This inner conflict is part of the process. It does not mean you are making the wrong choice. It means you are becoming aware of the difference between attachment and alignment. Healing begins not when the other person changes, but when you change your relationship with the situation. You stop waiting for consistency from someone who has shown you unpredictability. You stop expecting honesty from someone who has been comfortable with confusion. Instead of trying to fix what is outside of your control, you begin to focus on what is within it. Your attention, your energy, your decisions. There is a moment when you realize that holding on is not an act of love, but an act of resistance. You are resisting what is already being shown to you. You are resisting the truth because accepting it would require you to step into the unknown. Letting go, then, becomes less about losing someone and more about accepting reality as it is. It is the willingness to release what does not align, even if it once felt meaningful. This process also requires you to redirect your energy. When you are deeply invested in someone, much of your attention goes toward them, their actions, their words, their behavior. You analyze, you wait, you react. When you begin to let go, that energy slowly returns to you. At first, it may feel unfamiliar, even empty. You are no longer consumed by the same thoughts, but you have not yet filled that space with something new. In this space, you begin to rebuild your connection with yourself. You start noticing your own needs, your own boundaries, your own sense of peace. You begin to ask different questions, not about why the other person behaved a certain way, but about what you truly need in order to feel stable and respected. This shift in focus is where healing starts to take shape. Letting go also involves releasing the idea that you need closure from the other person. You may want explanations, apologies, or clarity that never fully comes. Waiting for these things can keep you tied to the situation longer than necessary. Instead, you begin to understand that clarity does not always come from words. It comes from patterns. What you have experienced is already enough to show you what you need to see. As you move through this process, you may feel moments of loneliness or doubt. This is natural because you are stepping away from something familiar, even if it was not healthy. But within this discomfort, there is also a quiet sense of relief, the absence of confusion, the absence of constant questioning, the absence of emotional instability. These create space for a different kind of peace to emerge. Over time, this peace becomes more noticeable. You are no longer trying to convince yourself that everything is fine. You are no longer adjusting your expectations to match someone else's inconsistency. You begin to experience a steadiness within yourself, a sense of clarity that does not depend on another person's behavior. In choosing to let go, you are not rejecting love. You are choosing a form of love that includes respect, honesty, and stability. You are recognizing that connection should not come at the cost of your well-being. And in this recognition, you begin to understand that walking away is not a loss, but a return to yourself. And in the end, you begin to understand something that once felt impossible to accept. Love should not feel like confusion. It should not feel like constant doubt. It should not require you to question your own worth just to keep it alive. What you experienced was not a failure of love. It was a lesson in awareness, a lesson that taught you the difference between attachment and truth, a lesson that showed you that loyalty is not something you beg for. It is something that is given freely or not at all. And as you stand here now, no longer lost in what could have been, you begin to see clearly what is. You see your strength in what you endured. You see your growth in what you finally accepted. And most importantly, you see yourself again, not as someone who was broken by love, but as someone who has awakened through it. Because the moment you stop chasing what hurts you, you create space for what truly respects you. And that is where peace begins, not in holding on, in finally letting go.